Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Time flies. We are in the final session of the day, so thank you for hanging there. Today, the final session today is titled Age of Knowledge. So in this session, we will explore research on various forms of employment and work relationships. We are lucky to have with us 4 experts to talk about this topic, of which 2 are from the academia to share their research. To open the session, I would like to welcome Pascal Marianna. Pascal is a labor statistician at the OECD with over 30 years of experience. He specializes in the measurement of working hours, wages, labor underutilization, and digital platform employment. Pascal has contributed extensively to several OECD publications on employment. He will be presenting on the trend of domestic outsourcing and its implications on job quality and inequality. Pascal, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to present, like Bunen said, a topic that was visited as a chapter in the OECD Employment Outlook 2021 edition. It was authored by my colleague Andrew Green, who couldn't make it today, so I'm substituting for him, actually, basically. So, yes, it is in front of me. Yes. So this is the overview. So I'll first of all walk you through the motivation for presenting this topic, and then go into some main findings of this work, this study. This will lead me to show you how we have defined and measured domestic outsourcing. And I'll finish with some data consideration. So as we saw since this morning, there is a general interest into measuring emerging new forms of employment, such as digital platform employment or green jobs associated with the green transition to net zero, to a decarbonated economy. But there is little attention received so far by other forms, non-negligible emerging trends in the labor market, such as domestic outsourcing. There are 2 reasons why firms would choose to hire employees through a separate or secondary firm rather than employing them directly. The first reason is that secondary firms offer more flexibility, increase productivity gains in the lead firms, and secondly, secondary firms may help reduce labor costs supported by lead firms. So now I'll walk you through some findings of our study. So what we see is there is an increasing share of workers in OECD countries that are legally employed by one firm, but in practice work for another. So the examples are cleaners, for example, security guards, cafeteria staff, who often physically work on the premises of the one firm, but their legal employer is a third-party support services company. Such tripartite employment relationships are often referred to as domestic outsourcing, and they are on the rise in many OECD countries, like we will see later on. Domestic outsourcing may bring productivity and employment gains, but workers in certain low-pay occupations, when employed by third-party contractor firms, they tend to earn less than those employed in similar in-house jobs. And the empirical findings show that, for example, cleaners and guards earn less than if they were employed by the lead firms, and this is confirmed by academic literature. These results hold on for cleaners and guards, but further research is needed to see if the results hold for a broader set of occupations, including high-wage occupations. All in all, it is likely that domestic outsourcing may contribute to overall earnings inequality, which deserves attention by policymakers for mitigating any deterioration in job quality for affected workers. So that's the main motivation for presenting to you this topic. So how we measured domestic outsourcing. One major form of domestic outsourcing is measured by firm-to-firm contracting of services. Domestic outsourcing arrangement between a lead firm and a third-party contracting firm is characterized by the following three features. A lead firm has a continuing need for labor services that is fulfilled by the third-party contracting firm. Secondly, the lead firm exercises significant supervision or control of the employees of the contractor firm without being the legal employer. Some remarks. It can be the case of a temporary agency worker, for example. If a lead firm contracts with a temporary agency work agency for a continuing labor demand, this relationship may fall under domestic outsourcing. Conversely, if it is for a temporary work arrangement, then this relationship will not fall under domestic outsourcing. In this chapter, we are only interested by domestic outsourcing within the national borders. So it has nothing to do with offshoring. However, domestic outsourcing is not limited to support occupations. In certain industries, lead firms use secondary firms to provide labor for their core activities as well. So this includes housekeepers in hotels, cooks in restaurants, etc. And own account workers, if they have an employment relationship with the lead firm, and if the lead firm supervises or monitors those workers, this would also fall under domestic outsourcing. That there are caveats such as dependent self-employed, which may be falsely categorized. So there are classification issues here. Then there is a case of business format franchising, which is a little explored, form of domestic outsourcing. There, a lead firm, the franchisor, signs long-term contracts with smaller independent firms, franchisees, to run the core business of the lead firm. But unfortunately, data on franchises and franchisees are rarely collected, except in the case of the US Census Bureau, which conducts a 5-yearly survey of establishments where they ask establishments whether they are operating under a franchise brand. I'll turn on to the results. And here, before presenting the results, I'm going to tell you exactly how we proceeded for the measurement of domestic outsourcing, starting with a broad measure and concentrating further on to some specific occupations. The broad measure is that we focus on employment in the administrative and support services industry, which is ISIC Revision 4, Section N. This provides a broad measure of domestic outsourcing. This industry captures general business support services provided to other firms. But as we expect, not all employment meets the definition of domestic outsourcing. This can be the case of travel agents, for example, travel agents booking family vacations. So this may not fall and does not fall under domestic outsourcing. Having these limitations in mind, what we see, and it is the chart which shows that, between 1995 and 2018, the share of total employment in this industry grew from a little less than 4% to more than 6% of total employment. And what is important to keep in mind is that this is outpacing service industry growth over the same period. So it seems to be an important phenomenon. And within that section N of ISIC Revision 4, there are some sub-industries where domestic outsourcing is more prevalent and which have seen rapid employment growth since 1995. This is the case of the investigative services and services to buildings and landscape activities that are displayed on the chart, and we see that the share is growing over the period that I've referred to. But in the meantime, we also see a wide variation between OECD countries that are displayed in the chart. In this subdivision of services, investigative services and services to buildings, we are going to focus on two occupations, which are namely cleaners and guards, and see how we have measured this domestic outsourcing for these occupations by making use of detailed industry and occupational classifications. Here I put up the definition of domestic outsourcing for these two categories of occupations. And so why this is so, we have selected these two categories because they can be easily identified as outsourced in labor force surveys by cross-classifying occupations and industries. And in those definitions, what is important to keep in mind is, first of all, the occupation is defined by ISCO 08, or the main occupational classification in place. Here we are using the European Labour Force Survey, so ISCO is 08, for example, after 2011. And this is also the case in the US and Australia, for which we had data to display the information. So for cleaners, you can refer to the cleaner and security guards. You can refer to the definitions that we have retained. For example, for European countries, cleaners are considered to be outsourced if they work in administrative and support services, and that's how we have captured the data. They have quantify the data for these two categories. What we are going to see in the next two slides. So I'm going to display separately the evolution of the share of outsourced cleaners and the share of security guards. And what we see is that, this amplifies what we have already shown in the broad measure, that these two categories have evolved quite a lot over time. So I only have 40 seconds left. So I'm going to dive into the data considerations. The focus on administrative support service provides only a proxy measure of domestic outsourcing. In this presentation, I've focused on cleaners and guards, which only represent two small typical cases of occupation. Outsourcing is prevalent in other occupations and industries, but this is not easily measurable for international comparison with publicly available data sets. Some occupations, for example, like high-skill information technology services, appear also to be increasingly outsourced, but not easy to measure, and also their task contents and have evolved over time and across countries, so it's difficult to measure. So what we need, actually, to conclude, is for measuring firm-to-firm outsourcing and subcontracting, what we need is both detailed industry information on firms and exact occupation assignment for workers, and this can be done, can be achieved with the aid of more detailed administrative data, and that's the conclusion. I'll stop here, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascal. Thank you, Pascal. Next, let's welcome Valeria Polignano. Valeria is a research professor of sociology at Kulovin. Besides this role, she is also coordinator of work, employment, and industrial relations at the European Sociological Association. She is also a researcher at the University of Warwick and Luxembourg Institute of Social Economic Research. She is also the editor of Work, Employment and Society, a leading international journal. Valeria specializes in employment relations in the industrial sector and labor market. Valeria will be presenting on unpaid work labor, precarity, and labor markets. Valeria, please. floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to Eurostat and ILO for inviting me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here as an academic to speak to so wonderful audience of policymakers, which we try as academics to reach out, and it's always difficult, so we it's a really privilege to be here today for my side. So in fact, what I'm going to present is some kind of work we have been doing within an ERC project called Respect Me. And I would like to start from these kind of pictures out there, which show, I think, quite striking data. These data come from different parts of the world, from the Australia and from the German side. They report on overtime unpaid labor. And particularly, these are reports from the NSV unions in Australia, which in fact report that 85% of the respondents on a larger study by sample size of about 5,000 respondents declares to do overtime unpaid labor. And the financial value of that, particularly, they declare to do at least 9 hours of unpaid overtime each week. The value, the equivalent financial value of this overtime for an average Australian worker is about $21,000. On the other side, the red side there, well, dark red, comes from the Trade Unions German Confederation, DGB, announcing also here unpaid overtime, about 702 million hours of overtime, which basically cover about 15 billion euro in terms of value. To me, these are striking data and provide further kind of a substance to what we have been doing. These are reports of 2024 and 2023, or 22 the German and 24 the Australian. So these provide actually quite an interesting substrate for what we have been doing within the Respect Me project. Why? Because in fact we have been studying unpaid labor. Now, before I give the definition of unpaid labor, which sounds a bit different from what we understand as unpaid labor, let me say what Respect Me has been trying to do. Respect Me has been trying to start from a kind of idea, which is to position work at the center of a continuum between work which is done inside the paid employment, inside the market, and outside the market. In particular, has tried to theorize, so to explain the occurrence of this unpaid labor by positioning work, in fact, in this kind of continuum. And when we talk about unpaid labor, we refer to the time and effort that workers, whether wage labor or no-wage labor, they spend in order to do tasks which are part of their own job descriptions and which, for whatever kind of reasons, they are not getting paid for. So you might tell me then it is this unpaid labor. Well, it is, in fact, underpaid labor or is unpaid labor, but actually the part of the time and the effort to me looks like more as being unpaid labor. But at the end, in fact, you see that this unpaid labor done in terms of time and effort means that it's done in an area where, in fact, these people are paid, of course. But the earnings that they receive doesn't compensate for the time, in fact, hours of work they do, and on the other side, from the effort that they do and they invest in their own work. So at the end of the day, what we see here is a lot of poverty, working poor as well. But the dimension of unpaid labor, I think, is quite appealing, still quite interesting, because it captures a dimension which probably needs to be more investigated. And in fact, at the end, work at this continuum means also to position a precarious work at this kind of continuous. And in fact, the question is to, again, understand whether and how unpaid labor accounts for this precarity. And what I can tell you is that, unfortunately, I cannot present the huge data that we have been collecting from a qualitative and quantitative side. I will just then afterwards present a little bit the measurement tool we have been creating. But what I can say till now is that, at this point in time, is that, this unpaid labor, this time and effort that people spend and they don't receive compensation for, so they don't actually get a kind of compensation for that, at the end of the day, translates into pressure which is put on other people. And this is the aspect of the looking at work in a relational perspective. If I'm doing paid labor in the labor market, there is always somebody who is actually sustaining and supporting my unpaid labor. And what we actually see is that in the majority of the circumstances, some people cannot afford, cannot have support for this unpaid labor through resources, which could be income, could be social resources, for example, a very important care, socially reproductive labor, but also the institutional resources in the labor market. And these are also quite interesting aspects. So let me say that, so looking at precarious work from this relational perspective, at least, to me, opens for this kind of novelty in the way in which we interrogate how work is performed in the paid labor market and needs to be taken into consideration just for that kind of reason. We have been investigating all what I'm talking about within RespectMe by looking at different contexts where growing diversities and complexities due to institutional and organizational changes in workplaces within different work areas are happening and have been happening since the last 20 years and even more, like particularly home care, creative industries, and also platform economy, the gig work. And we have been looking at all these across different European countries, which are just mentioned here on the slides. What we have been doing, we have been interrogating unpaid labor by asking to the people, to the workers in the labor market, waged and non-waged labor, whether they do it unpaid, and why do they do it? So the question we have been posing are just there on the slides. I'm not going to tell more about it, but particularly interesting to us was the kind of, motivations. Why do they do that? And trying to capture through that the extent to which, and the support they get for this unpaid labor at home and in the labor market, to try to investigate to what extent, in fact, unpaid labor entails or leads to precarious work, or whether precarious work unfolds automatically from this unpaid labor. And I can tell you that, the scenario is not, it is problematic, but unpaid labor is not per se problematic in the sense that, again, if people get resources to support and to be resilient, then of course this unpaid labor can, support them as well in creating careers, in, getting nice things in life. But if this is not the case, of course, these people get much more entrapped into situation of precarity. We have been publishing a lot around this issue, and I would like just to concentrate on two things here. The first thing, as I said, we have been doing work in the gig economy. We have been investigating, how this unpaid labor, what kind of forms it takes in terms of time, material resources, immaterial resources. And we have been actually finding this kind of picture you see there, probably is not very much visible. But what I would like to shed light here are two things. By investigating unpaid labor in gig for delivery workers, food delivery workers vis-a-vis freelancing on platforms, we observe that in fact, the kind of classification of the employment status for particularly food delivery workers is a very important issue, which can actually mitigate unpaid labor for those workers, because the majority of those workers on paid platform, they declare, in fact, the waiting time is one of the major issue that leads to the unpaid labor they perform. For freelancing, it's completely different story. Freelancers have always been doing unpaid. At the moment, what we see here is that the unpaid labor performed by freelancer is very much linked to the price settings that they might set as self-independent, in fact, genuine freelancing. And there we see, in fact, the issue of the competition playing an important role in undermining conditions for freelancers. And therefore, what we conclude is that business models in platforms play an important role in explaining this unpaid labor. Now, I have very few minutes, so I will probably escape this, but I just want to say that one conclusion which comes out of our work is, in fact, labor market should be made more equitable, and this is a policy sort of outcome, in order to address the unequal distribution of resources, in order to be able to make also of this unpaid labor something which can be used properly by people and workers, and not really letting them, engaging in situation of precarity. Now, on the measurement, I will just present some descriptive data. here. We have been, based on the theorization, we've been creating a measurement tool for unpaid labor. And, this unpaid labor, in the way how I've been describing it, let me get here, consists of three important dimensions: time, material, immaterial. The descriptive data, if I have the time, I will illustrate to you. They just cover the time and the material, but not the immaterial. The reason also is because at the very moment we are still analyzing the data, polishing the data, and doing a lot of stuff. In terms of time categories, you see out there a lot of the kind of sub-dimensions of this time. We actually run from, waiting time, waiting time between different jobs and tasks, preparation tasks for the main tasks, communication time with clients and employers, administrative paperwork that people need to do and they report to be sometimes unpaid, travel time between different jobs. This is a particular characteristic of care work, but also maintenance time, the time spent on maintaining work equipment, network time, which is quite important for professionals to get on the market. And in terms of material here is really about infrastructure. So what workers do they need in order to work? And we see here that sometimes these material resources are not even furnished by companies. They are just paid by the workers and then the companies take advantage of it. But we also have different scenarios. We have been running our surveys across different countries with panel representative surveys and using the UK as a pilot for validating our instrument. I have to run here, unfortunately. So here you have a kind of indication about, the kind of image about our survey in terms of also the sample and so forth. In terms of the UK, well, this was a pilot survey. And, our sample was pre-stratified by gender, age, education, employment status, and employment contract. And also we have been, of course, getting some kind of a nice information about the net monthly income for main job. Here you can see, in the UK, a bit, kind of moved towards the lower end rather than the higher end, I would say. And these are the two other panel surveys in France and in Sweden. And also here you can see the distribution of the income because we have also been asking people to report on that. And well, in Sweden we see a very kind of top on 27%, even more, on a kind of quite relatively high level of income reported. And in France, a much more, kind of equal distribution. But nevertheless, in Sweden, I think that in comparison with the UK, we see certainly the difference here in terms of the distribution of income. Now, let me go perhaps very fast on the last. My papers fall down. Okay, so let me go to the frequency in doing this kind of unpaid. So as you can see here in the comparison between France and Sweden, what do we see? Well, certainly unpaid, paid is much more prevalent in comparison to unpaid. But what we see here is also that some forms of unpaid are reported much more than others, like communication, administration, paperwork, preparing and training as well, being unreported, in fact, much more in comparison to traveling, maintaining, and networking. However, what we also see here is that in Sweden, communication time with clients is, in fact, much more higher reported by people in comparison to France, where administration time seems to be quite more highly. And training is probably less reported because, in fact, these are countries where, in fact, training gets to be paid by people. In the UK, the situation looks much more problematic. People tend to do much more much more highly unpaid on the different categories, and particularly, I highlighted here in red what we see here. Interesting training is also reported being unpaid. Probably I will just close here. We just look at these other slides on the unpaid overtime. Interesting here, unpaid overtime in France seems to be higher than in Sweden. And particularly also in comparison higher than in the UK. Now, why this is the case, we are still investigating it. One of the reasons could also be that, people here in France, in fact, having this kind of 35 weeks working time week, of course, report the time. So in their own perception, if they do unpaid labor, they report on this much more sharply. I have to run, so I don't have, I think, the time, but I want to just point to this voluntarism and voluntary work unpaid in the UK being, in comparison, much higher than in the other two countries, Sweden and France. And finally, I would just like to close with this. We have been, as I said, asking to people, why do you do unpaid? And we have been clustering around three categories: the kind of inevitability, so there is nobody else that can do this unpaid. I am the only one who have to do this work. Or, for example, this unpaid being endemic in the part of their own work, or being results of reward. I do it because I get career opportunities and so forth, or a penalty. What we see here is that people, the scenario is very complicated, very complex. But what we could see as a result of this situation, well, people report the inevitability, particularly because there is nobody else who can do this job, and reward being the main motivations why do they engage in unpaid labor. Now, this brings to the issue of the labor shortage on the one hand, it brings to the issue also of the rewarding elements. Now, to me, these are they are dramatic outcomes, but also they are not so dramatic in the sense that we can, via policy, address these issues by giving much more capacity to people to make choices, to increase their own capability in the labor market, rather than, constraining them in the kind of situations and scenarios in which they are. And I would like to thank my colleagues and thanks all of you for listening to me, and sorry for being late.
Thank you, Valeria. I let the clock run a little bit because I think that was the last part was actually the most interesting of why people want to do unpaid work. And that would then show us the expectations of unpaid work, whether it will increase going forward. Yeah, next up, we have Uma Rani. She's a senior economist with the International Labour Organization. Since 2016, Uma has been researching on digital transformations in the world of work. She has made extensive contributions to the ILO publications on the topic of digital transformations. Uma will share with us insights on new and emerging tasks and occupations associated with digital transformation. Uma, please.
Thank you, Boone, and good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here, and also an honor to be here. So I'm going to take you to a different terrain now. I think what you've been hearing is, okay, what's been happening to the employment status, what's been happening to domestic outsourcing, and I think Valeria got into unpaid work. I'm going to take you a bit more beyond that into something called as invisible labor and leave it at algorithmic management for the next speaker to basically pick up. So what I'll speak on is the new emerging tasks and occupations with digitalization. You'll have a lot of pictures in the coming 9 slides, and the last slide is what will have some points for discussion as we get into the future. The first one that I want to talk about is an emerging task that is coming up related to the development of AI. Don't worry about the too much complication of it. As we go on, I'll explain to you. There are 3 things that are very important to look at. When we talk about AI, or when we talk about development of AI, or large language models, or even development for autonomous cars or whatsoever, there are 3 things that are very important. One is the preparation for the AI, that is data generation, data annotation. Then is the most important part, which is the modeling, which is where the algorithm comes in. And then there is something called as AI verification, which is the output that is actually checked or not. So as a result, if you really look at occupations, you're talking about AI preparers, AI verifiers, AI impersonators, I'll talk about it in a bit, which is in my terminology also called as invisible workers, or what I also call deceptive AI in a way. And then you have AI modelers, who are basically software programmers that we all know, and it's part of the occupation category. Now, when you look at the autonomous vehicles, today, if anybody has had a chance to look at Tesla, or drive into a Tesla, it's very impressive because you see everything being modeled. You can see a building, you can see a tree, you can see a man, you can see all the traffic as well as the people's movement. Now, for an autonomous vehicle to be developed, you need an automotive data engine, and you need 3 tasks. One is data labeling, data curation, and model evaluation. Now, when I looked up at the occupation category, I did find labelers. And that is not the same as data labelers, because these are very unskilled workers working in the manufacturing or the service industry, sticking labels onto the products. And for us in this industry, the data laborers are equivalent to data annotators. And I'll discuss that a bit more in detail in the next 2 slides. And then what is very important that is coming up as an occupation as a result of the development of autonomous vehicles is data curators, because you need to know what is the kind of data you need and what needs to be cleaned or what needs to be labeled or annotated, and then put them together so that that could be used by the modelers in curating and developing the kind of algorithm that is needed for the autonomous vehicle to move on. Now, what does data labeling or annotation task mean? Now, if we look around, there are a number of annotation industry or companies that exist, actually. This is where we get into what is called as international outsourcing, because you have automobile companies in the global north, and you have all these annotation industry or companies actually based in a number of developing countries or on microtask platforms, where they transform large raw data sets into training data by identifying certain attributes and adding metadata. So the typical data annotation task would include drawing bounded boxes, like you see in the right-hand slide, identifying semantic and polygonal segmentation, annotating general images and video, labeling entities, and categorizing content and text. Now, you know the words polygonal segmentation, semantic segmentation, very hi-fi. You know, you think it's very complex, but it's not. What a semantic segmentation means, it's basically nothing than pixel labeling everything in an image, which is the trees you see, the sidewalks, the dogs, the pedestrians, the traffic lights. Everything has to be tagged very clearly so that that can be recognizable for anything. And this is exactly what happens in large language learning models too. It's not just not in autonomous cars. This is another kind of data annotation task that you see, which is categorization, landmarking, and polygon. The examples is just to show you what are the kind of new tasks that are coming in, which are not really being captured by different surveys as such. Probably they're captured as something else and get hidden, but I think it's important for us to capture them within the type of tasks that they do. On the left-hand side is something called as categorization or classification in a way. And the e-commerce industry that has come in, and with the Web 2.0, you have a lot of workers on micro-task platforms who actually do it. So when you get onto an e-commerce platform, you see everything is very nicely labeled, and you think it's an algorithm. It's actually not an algorithm. It's either workers in developing countries, in the BPO or the outsourced companies, or it is microtaskers on microtask platforms who are actually going about labeling all of these activities. Then you have something called as landmarking, as you saw in the earlier slide, which is basically plotting characteristics in a data, such as eyes, nose, and image, and this is what they do for facial recognition. This is all humans behind who are actually labeling. It doesn't happen automatically. And the polygon is nothing but outlining the highest vertices or points of a target object so that you can see what the shape is, and this is done for a lot of topographical details, land, and houses, and all of that. Now, as a result, there are a number of new occupations in data labeling or annotation tasks that have come in, and I looked at some of the studies that have been undertaken. Part of it is work that we at the ILO have been doing, but part of it is also the academic work that is coming out, because annotation has become a big, big industry today. So you find data annotator, data quality analyst, engineering data operations, annotator validator, process executive, annotation engineer. The reason why I've listed them all is when you look at them, and when you think of them, and when you look at who's doing it, it's actually postgraduates with engineering and computer science, very clearly. But if you look at the task that it entails, it doesn't require any level of IT or computer science knowledge. Anybody with a 12th class a secondary education can actually do this task. So this raises the issue about skills and occupations match that we want to talk about when we get into this issue. Now, there's also an issue about visibility and invisibility of work, because a lot of these workers are invisible. And when those autonomous cars run today, like, forget even the Teslas, even the other cars that have come, there's a lot of automation that is there today. And all of that is being done by some workers behind the screen. Now, there are a number of other tasks which are not in the occupation category: data scientist, natural language processing expert, data analyst, IT quality and testing professions, because these are all part of this a higher level processing of this work, which needs to be taken into consideration. Here's a task on AI personators. Now, what we see today is, with the rise of AI tools, there's a lot of automated surveillance or automated secretarial services or bots that are there. Let me tell you that based on the research we have been doing and with other academics, we've found that there's no AI in it. One of the simplest examples is the first one, where in the French supermarkets, you have an automated surveillance tool today that exists to actually catch anybody, to monitor anybody, whether they're thieving or not. There's no AI in it. It's a CCTV with workers in BPOs in Madagascar, in India, and other countries who are actually looking at this particular TV, learning to master this task, and they surveil. Now, one argument one could have is, this is as good as a guard or a security agent from a distance location, but I think we need to really think about how to categorize them. Again, many of these workers are computer scientists and IT professionals. Similarly, you have a lot of bot work being done. You think it's AI, it's not. It's humans, it's workers in many developing countries actually matching or replying to many of the messages. Now, there is a lot of training happening as a result of it, but because these AI bots are not perfect, you still have a lot of humans working on it. I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to go quick, but this is very important. Content moderators. This is a profession that has come in. It's been there for more than 20 years, but we have got it to the light in the last 5 to 6 years, where you have everything in Web 2.0 and social media platforms being moderated by humans, either microtask platforms or in BPO companies, where they basically verify any content that is objectionable. And I think we have also seen in large language learning models, this came out with the ChatGPT, where you had human workers actually going about doing this work. The issue is not only that of the skills, but the issue is about the valuation of this work, because this has huge psychosocial impact on the workers. And then there's a lot of data generators that are coming in for AI training, because the data is not enough. You need to create more data, so you use a lot of workers. And then there is the search engine optimizers, which has come up in a big way. If anybody wants their web page to be on the top, it's very simple today. You just have to go click, click, click. There's an army of laborers who are there who can actually go about doing this job. And this is, again, an issue around who's doing this job, which is, again, very highly skilled workers. Issues for discussion. I have only 30 seconds, but let me put it out. Now, I think the issues that come up very clearly is, if you look at all the tasks that I've mentioned to you, the skill requirements for all these tasks or occupations, when workers are doing the interview, are very high. But the task is often quite mind-numbing or does not require that kind of a skill. So I think the issue of skills mismatch needs to be looked at it from a different angle. There are challenges of unpaid work in all the contexts that we have seen. There's penetration of algorithmic management practices, not only in microtask platforms, but coming in to the BPO call centers today. The biggest problem I see is the fragmentation of tasks as a result of AI tools coming in and platforms coming in. Whether you're talking about development of computer systems or programming or legal services, tasks are today actually broken down into a number of pieces. They are outsourced onto the platforms. They're collated and bundled and then given to the client as a complete job. Now, what happens is this kind of unbundling and bundling leads to losing of skills for the workers who would normally have a very good knowledge about the entirety of it. That is now got into a very piecemeal. There's a larger issue around valuation for emerging or new tasks. One of the easiest ways that people do is, let's give them the minimum wages. Forgetting that, the minimum wages is for unskilled workers, and these are very highly qualified workers. And for them, we need to really think about what are these tasks, what are the social, psychological implications of it, and then try to value work for them. And the final one is, I think in all of this discussion, these tasks need also to look at moral and ethical considerations. You know, as a society, do we really want all of this to be done? At what cost? And, you know, what is the AI we are all talking about, where a number of these occupations are coming? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Uma. Last but not least, we have Utkarsh Yakut Senkarich. Utkarsh is an associate professor at Gurden's University of Technology. He's also a coordinator of Center for Technological, Economic and Social Transformation and one of the founders of the Institute of Labour Market Analysis. He specializes in issues of human capital management and labour market transformation. He also serves as an expert advisor to national governmental bodies in Poland and abroad. Utkarsh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm last, but I hope that I will serve a little bit more about this edge of knowledge that we have started already doing in this session. And surprisingly for this audience, I like numbers. So let me refer first to my fully analog data sheet here. And the term of algorithmic management, of which we will discuss now, have already been mentioned 9 times by 4 distinct presenters here on this stage. So I think this is something that we quite a lot discuss or maybe brag a little bit, and I would like to shed a little bit more time about this. Algorithmic management is discussed mostly in relation to digital platform work, and this is understandable because we have fully fledged and functional models in food delivery or car driving companies. But it is more and more pressing into the more traditional work contexts. We have examples from handheld devices in warehouse for warehouse workers or customer relationship management software for salespeople, for example, that already have these functions. So I would like to discuss a little bit about the future of algorithmic management, starting with the distinction of the definition. I think this is a very important because now the discussion is mostly focusing on the general AI models, while the algorithmic management is a more specialized way of using AI, of course, incorporating a number of different technologies that are behind AI, but for the specific purpose. This purpose is a kind of automation of the control system and the management practices used for the management of workers. So it's a little bit interfering with the world of work as we know it, in a sense, maybe also with the quality of future works. Maybe in the future, one of your colleagues will be astonished that you have a human manager, in fact, and this will be some feature of the high quality work. This is not just a science fiction, and I will try to a little bit convince you. Algorithmic management is, as I said, based on a number of AI technologies, in fact, and those models that are operational, like in the car driving companies, they incorporate a number of these technologies, machine learning, natural language processing, recommendation engines for different purposes. Because we have to understand what, in fact, the algorithmic management really is and how it differs from the traditional forms of management. Using data in management of people is not algorithmic management. In fact, we use data all the time and for many years since the beginning of modern management. In fact, what the algorithmic management is, it is aiming to kind of exclude the manager, the person, the human manager from the process. So, of course, many authors argue if the fully automated algorithmic management is even possible or is operational, but in fact the developments are so rapid that possibly in the very near future we will have more and more applications that can, to large extent, even if not fully, what is meant by fully. So, for example, still the model can be operational in a way that the decision can be made fully automated, but it can be, for example, still rivaled by the human manager and overruled. But in a fully automated model, we just take the decision that it is made by the algorithm. So this is a little bit frightening, but the level of automation is really the defining factor. Algorithms currently in management of human tasks, especially on the examples that we have as operational, do three major functions. It's algorithmic direction, evaluation, and algorithmic discipline. More precisely, already a number of applications, apart also from the food delivery platforms or other platform work, do have possibilities to work scheduling or setting goals without human intervention, monitoring of human work without human intervention, appraisal through different rating systems, remuneration, or even employment termination without human intervention. This is algorithmic management. Of course, in terms of the, in terms of the specific applications, there are very different levels of algorithm types, and the most advanced are prescriptive algorithms. When you look on the right-hand side of this table, so for example, we in a platform, food delivery platform, get automated instructions to poor performing workers. Or in the warehouses, we have the information on the handheld, we are not performing on time. This is something that is really already operational and in a sense is based on real-time information, which is possible with the growing AI and computational abilities. So in the sense, this right-hand side probably is currently more of the future of management and managerial work, but some of the elements of it are already existing. So if this is what we will be facing. We have heard today from one of the presenters on the challenges or biases of algorithmic management. Again, this is on this right-hand side. If algorithms are not right properly, they are prone to bias based on different categories of information, gender bias or other forms of bias. There is very little contextual information in algorithms. We don't have usually as much knowledge about, for example, the worker as the managers have. There is also inadequate data. What we heard, these algorithms have to be taught, very labor-intensive process, and there have been information from many algorithm shepherd farms, very worrying information that the working conditions there are really very bad. Lack of transparency. We call algorithms in management the black boxes because we cannot really look into them. And also acceptance of algorithmic decisions. We are not very prone to accepting decisions made exclusively by computers, by machines, so they are being contested, and some, of course, ethical considerations. But on the other hand, there are arguments, especially raised by employers who use them, that they, of course, can lower costs, and this is more more visible in the upscaling of activities. If you have one very good operating platform for example, management of food delivery, basically you can upscale it virtually to any scale. Right? And you don't have to employ, train managers, build their skills, acknowledge your workers. This is all very time and money saving. Of course, also productivity gains, diminishing human bias in a sense, of course, when the algorithm is prepared quite well. It is also possible, theoretically at least, to increase procedural and distributive fairness, because we don't make these human errors, and increase consistency of decisions, so replicability of decisions, and increase objectivity. But of course, there's a lot of things we don't know about algorithms. Not only the scale of the algorithm used, but it's probably mostly now used in the digital platform work. But we also don't know, and this is based on the number of research I can refer you to, what is the current and future level of automation. We still cannot predict how fast it will proceed. What is the level of algorithm aversion, resistance, acceptance? This differs. We know already this differs, for example, among different generations. Younger workers are more prone to accepting algorithmic decisions and algorithms in their life because they are digital natives. We don't know, as for example in the autonomous cars, whom to hold responsible for our algorithmic decisions in terms of managing people, right? Who is responsible? If we have a manager, this is quite easy. We have someone to talk to. We have someone to refer to. In this sense, it's just algorithm. And how will the algorithmic management affect power dynamics in organizations? We still cannot imagine, or let me rephrase it. Imagine the world of work with the automation and robotization, people in factories replaced by machines. Then the world of work when there will be people in organizations, but managed by algorithms, right? Or maybe the algorithms will manage algorithms. You might be smiling, but last week I have seen the call for publication of one of the issues of the journal, actually about AI to AI platforms, online platforms. So, I mean, this is happening already. Some services will be offered by one AI system to another AI system, which is quite possible. Already technically possible, at least. And then will it mainstream from platform work to other business types? And my last slide, and I will just have one call, and I think I should almost make it in time, is the tech paradox, which is under-researched. This is a notion that if we outsource functions to technology, we gradually lose ability to do it ourselves. So if there will be less and less managers, what will be the trade-off in managerial skills? Maybe in the future, we will need much more effort to develop managerial skills due to the loss of ability to do it. Then, YouTubification of management. This is a little bit scary in terms of the acceptance of the managerial decisions of the youngest generations, right? Because they believe in what is there in the algorithm, in the internet. Older generations usually are much contesting to this. And, you know, we don't really have the possibility to look into the algorithm. We don't know how it is created, by whom, how it operates, and this is a very strictly kept secret. And also the external effects, which I think for this audience are very important, like negative effects for the workers, distrust, unethical behaviors, but most importantly, the effects for work autonomy, job satisfaction, and all the important elements that constitute high-quality jobs. This might be really significantly affected. And my last point here would be a call to statisticians, to representatives, to policymakers, in order to advance in knowledge, especially in such issues which are under-researched. It is impossible to be done without statistical data. But we rely as researchers on microdata. So basically, we receive this microdata and they are becoming available quite late. So, for example, when I research algorithmic management on the data set, very useful European company survey by Eurofound, which is available on the 2019 data, it's like prehistory. In terms of algorithmic management over the last 5 years, over the pandemic, a lot of things have changed. So my call is to make efforts to make the data for research more available and quite sooner. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Ushkash, for the very interesting presentation. And thank you all the speakers for the diverse and interesting presentations. They range from outsourcing to unpaid labor to digital work to making managers redundant. I think my boss would like to hear the last part. But personally, for me, I think this comes out with a lot of policy implications rising from these emerging forms of employment. And to tackle income inequality, as speakers mentioned a lot of it, and to also skills gaps, especially to Uma, part of the presentation. Okay, I'll open up to the floor for questions. I hope there will be a lot more questions that come in for this last part. I already see a lady that has a question. Why don't you start off?
Thank you very much. This was an incredibly interesting panel. My name is Victoria Proskorovska. I represent World Employment Confederation. And I have particularly 2 questions for the last 2 speakers. And the first one for Uma. I think you raised an incredibly important question about skills and occupations. What you were alluding to at the end of your presentation about, people graduating from universities with very high degrees doing the equivalence of unskilled labor. How do you look at skills-based hiring, which is now seems to be picking up the pace? Wouldn't this be one of the solutions to the situation where people are overqualified for the kind of work they do? And that could probably create an issue of reducing the scope of opportunities for the IT engineers to work, because they will be probably overqualified and therefore not hired for these jobs, but maybe they can find a better way to apply their knowledge and their abilities. My second question is to the last speaker. I mean, you have scared me a lot. No, I understand. What is the purpose of AI to AI platforms? AI should not, I think, have any motivation to work. A human has motivation to work, to earn money. What is this parallel world that is developing that is going completely outside the control of a human? Thank you.
Okay, why don't Uma, you take the question first? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you so much. I think the question that you raise is very important, and we very clearly see in the developing countries, workers are very overqualified for the kind of jobs they do. And one of the reasons why that is happening is many of these BPO IT companies, many of them were set up with the Y2K, that is turn of the last century. And these are many of them are very reputed companies which have gone into a lot of annotation work today and content moderation work. And when they try, and they have their own reputation as companies, and when they try to hire many of these workers, I think I want to do some work on misinformation and disinformation, because when you want to hire these workers, you tell them that you're going to become a data analyst in 6 months' time, okay? You attract them. And when they get onto the job interviews are very much like the way you would be hiring someone to do software coding or programming. You're looking at a lot of technical skills. You try to see whether they have Python knowledge and all of that. But the minute you get into the job, none of that matters. And it's only 6 months down the line, they realize that they're not going, this job is not going to lead them to any data analyst or get them to, hone their skills further or whatsoever. And that's where there's a whole issue of frustration, and there's a whole issue around where else do you go. Because I think one of the biggest problems we are facing in many developing countries at the moment is lack of meaningful labor market opportunities where you can actually use the skills that you have for the purpose that it's required. And I think one of the policy interventions that we require is, there is a need to develop a lot of different type of automation and different type of development in many of these countries. But I think we are not there with the policy level, and we need to identify those sectors and use them more productively.
Yes, thank you again. So again, that was not my intention to scare anyone, just to realize that the changes are really happening there, and they are very fast and overwhelming in a sense. If, as an economist, I would answer very simply, if there is demand, there will be a supply for the platform. So of course, the owners of these platforms, AI to AI, are humans, and they are making money of it. And this is very simple answer. But of course, we have to realize that this is the stream of changes that we should very strongly oppose. This is this perspective of full automation of the labor market versus the augmentation perspective, which is something that we should be promoting, also using all possible policy tools that we have, like the directives, etc. Because what we want to do actually is to augment human work and make AI work for people, human-centric AI. So this is the example of a completely different direction for which I personally think we should oppose and say it's not the direction that we should be supporting.
Okay. I think the lady over there has a question in white.
Thank you very much. My name is Maria Moutaki. I'm chairing the Employment Committee Indicators Group. And tomorrow we are going to have also an interesting panel in the afternoon. Thank you very much for the presentations, and the question refers to the challenges of algorithmic management that Tedas mentioned. How you think that work could be developed in the future in terms of the data development and the challenges that will more and more appear with regard to data collection on the risks of algorithmic management, and also the ethical implications that come out of them. If you think so, if you think that we should also work with regard to measurement on the ethical implications as well more, in order to mitigate the risks that exist and will keep appearing due to the automation and the predominance of of algorithmic management in the companies. Thank you.
Yeah, you just answer. So.
Okay. I think very clearly one of the things that I felt also when Lucas was presenting was how do we also actually try to measure this through the surveys, and I think that's a thought that we need to put in. I do know that JRC, Joint Research Center of the European Commission, is doing some surveys, but I think we'll have to systematically think about that. One point that is very important and clear is, or rather we would like to push very clearly, is the fact that how can we try to get systematic data on the type of occupations and the kind of skills that are required? Because unless and until we do that systematically, it's very, very difficult to say what is the proportion of workers we are talking about. As of now, we have no clue about the number of workers who are actually engaged in it. So even to have any kind of a policy intervention, it becomes very, very important for us to have that kind of a data to take it forward, basically.
Thank you. Yes, I think we are still missing the good quality data and measurements for the algorithmic management. There are some efforts, as you said, taken by Joint Research Center, but also by Eurofound and CEDEFOP in order to measure the impact of AI and also algorithmic management. But these are usually very underdeveloped still studies, and we try to analyze it kind of indirectly, without direct measures. But I think that ethics is a very important question here. It's very early to discuss, the ethical perspective of such applications, but we should start now. I mean, because this is a very threatening ethically area, especially when you talk about unconscious and sometimes conscious, we don't know because it's a black box, biases that are embedded in the algorithms that can in fact exclude a number of people even from the entering the labor market in a sense. One of the examples I always give is the facial recognition software for the recruitment applications that are being prepared, of course, on the basis of some standards, best performing employees, but we also in Gdańsk University of Technology research neurodiversity. So for neurodiverse individuals, facial recognition software is a gate that they will not be able to cross in majority. So basically, they are excluded from applications from the start, from the first interaction with AI. So basically, we have to be very conscious of such possibilities from the very start of these applications.
Thank you, Ushkash. Well done, this gentleman.
Yes, no, very interesting panel, but I'm thinking, and my question is something that we don't measure, or at least it's beyond our scope of the labor statistics, actually, which is the oligopsonic power that employers have over workers in their own markets. For example, non-pay overtime, or overskill requirements, or the use of AI and other types of management for the workers, and the workers can't say anything about that. Perhaps something that we should know, and there should be other means, and perhaps someday we will know, is precisely which type of enterprises are those that they are imposing this type of practices, which are the ones that they have this oligopsonic power on the labor market, on the workers, that allow them to impose practices that people wouldn't normally accept. Now the labor shortages that everybody is talking about, and especially IFIs and the central bank, and the evidence would show at least higher wages and increasing wages, but actually there's no evidence of that. Sometimes that's also part of a narrative in relation. And I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm the economist of ITUC. For us, tight labor markets or labor shortages imply better collective bargaining, higher wages, better negotiation. So something that we should try to improve are also enterprise surveys, and try to understand the business structure in order to place all these practices in a more comprehensive way.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure whether Valeria and Pascal, you have anything to add from outsourcing as well as unpaid work perspective?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think absolutely. I think that the idea of control is very interesting. So in other words, what is unpaid now, if I look from a perspective of unpaid, what is this about? It's about the lack that workers they have, and even freelancers, genuine self-employed, to have control on the conditions of their own work. When do they work? When do they finish work? Fine, but how much can they earn? What kind of possibilities they have to determine their own prices? I repeat again, for freelancers, this comes really very important and linked to competitions across different platforms. And I would say now, if I go, I wanted just to link a little bit very quickly on this issue of the II. There, also unpaid plays a role, because the question is then, how do we see this use of digital tech impacting the conditions of work? And this is about work intensification, work extensification, which has a lot of implication for well-being and quality of working life. Now, moving from this survey, I've been kind of presenting some data, to other research we are currently doing in manufacturing, we see that as being a huge issue. Data analytics and use of data creates opportunities for companies, of course, to create a continuous improvement, but this continuous improvement has a lot of implication, bad implication for workers. And there, of course, there is a scope, I think, for, also putting a focus on these issues, also through measurement tools. Thank you.
Pascal?
So,
You can use two, yeah, it's fine.
no, what I want to say, I think it's the right direction to think about, we are always talking about individual surveys or household surveys, and maybe in these cases, it's more business surveys, enterprise surveys. And there, about all the risks that Lukasz and Valentina and Uma have highlighted, maybe there should be a deep dive into understanding and management processes and the business processes. How do enterprises operate? Whether they will be willing to participate into this kind of debate or answer those questions, it's another ball game. But in the meantime, I think that the reflection should be towards enterprise surveys to understand what's going on there, and the future seems to be threatening, as Lukasz is putting rightly in that direction. And if it is AI that dialogue with other AIs, where the human being is. So we should have human-centric, I think, kind of policy debate, and for that we need data, and the data should come from business surveys, maybe, and so it can be the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascal. I let Ricardo have the final question.
Can the final question stand up?
Yep, sorry, the gentleman in front, Ricardo.
Thank you. I will be very fast. Question for Valeria. You spoke about this extra time, unpaid extra time work. How far your survey covered also 100% unpaid work, and how to distinguish this from form of learning on the job or training?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, actually, yes. I mean, it comes basically through the training. The training is an important, I think, dimensions where you can capture, the kind of also activities of unpaid which are related to what you do in order to, kind of work, be enabled to work and to learn on your work. And in that sense, I think we see interesting evidence. Something I couldn't say, but is very evident, is the difference across countries comes very much in light. UK being the worst, Sweden being the best, and France being in the middle. We will see what Holland will deliver in that sense, because we just collected the data and we have to clean the data and analyze the data. But in terms of extra time, in terms of longer working hours, so we capture how many hours, so people report on how many hours do they work in comparison with the contractual working hours. And this is, also a possibility to kind of see how in extension, longer hours do they work, whether these creates, again, then unpaid labor or not depends, as I said, on the earnings. And also on what extent, you meet the minimum wages, to what extent what you earn meets or gives you opportunity to have ends meet. This is what is interesting also for us to look at. So it's not just, the kind of working longer, but also how much you earn by doing that. And this is interesting, and this is what we see links into then the resources that you put and you need in order to support that way of working. Because that's another important, interesting aspect that we see. This inequality in precarity is not just precarious work, it's inequality in precarity in the sense that we see now, by using sociological categories of class, is a class-based issue. If you are in a particular class category doing, within specific occupations, you tend to, income, you tend to, reproduce your class. So, is really a kind of perverse or I would say not virtuous circle at all. And this is very, I would say, very worrying to me, at least. But I think should be worried for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. With that, I think we have come to the end of the session, as well as the presentations. Let's give the speakers a round of applause. Okay, thank you. And I hand you guys back to Christine. Yeah.
Yes, finally it's me. It's not Christine.
Okay.
we change again. Do you hear me? Yes. Okay. No. So at noon I said that I will give you now again some information and instructions for the evening for the social event. But as Christine also told you at the break, we will also do now a photo for all the participants. So even if you don't go after to the social events, please first listen my instruction, and second, stay with us if you can, of course, and if you want to share a few minutes more with us so we can all together have a photo. So what to do now? First of all, we have to go out exactly as we went in this morning. So you have to go upstairs again to the panoramic hall to cross it, and to go to the lift, which are on the other side. And from where you arrived this morning, go down to the first level. And here, please just go out, but wait. Wait there. It will be the point where we will organize the things outside. We will just bring you to the place to make the photo, which is very close. So go out, and then if you are among the first ones, please wait for the group down. So we will make this photo, and then of course those who do not go to the social events, you can of course leave at that time. For the others, we just go to the Magritte Museum, which is 200 meters from here. It's very close, and we will of course bring you. So we will go all together, but it's very close. Just to let you know. There in the Magritte Museum will be privatized for us, so we have a full exclusive use during 1 hour and a half or a bit more. It will not be a guided tour. It will be a free tour, but in each level, there is 2 or 3 levels, I don't know exactly, but at each level you have guides. So that means you want to have information about a paint, you want to have some explanation about something, you can ask them. So they are here for you. But it's not a full guided tour, which would have been maybe a bit more complicated, a bit heavy. So it's flexible, but then you have, of course, information, all the information you want. So after that, so the plan is to be back here for the cocktail, which will be again in the panoramic hall, and the time of the start of the cocktail is 7:30. If you have belongings or any additional cloth you would like not to use. So you can let them in the cloakroom in the entrance here. Or in the museum, you will have also some lockers where you can put any bag. So the two options, as you want. Sorry, my paper with that, it's a bit difficult, but okay. Yes. So now, at any time, have with you at least, you can have nothing, but you should have your badge and your ID or passport, because there will be security control in the museum, in the entrance, and again, back here to go up. Sorry, but there is a need of security, so it is necessary. I think that's all. I don't think I have forgotten something. So in any case, we will be with you at any time. Tomorrow morning, so the session starts at 9 o'clock. But the reception, the building will be open at 8:30. So from 8:30 to 9 you arrive, and at 9 we start with the fourth session tomorrow morning. Okay, so see you in a few minutes downstairs. Thank you.